Is yours.
Thank you. I would like to first thank everyone being here today and also the organizers for creating this wonderful space to share our research. And so I will be presenting a very brief summary of what was my PhD research that I very recently concluded late last year. And my PhD was focused on understanding everyday life practices in a sedentary settlement. Sorry, a moment. Okay. So because my main interest was to understand how people live their daily lives, we approached a settlement from the early Iron Age of Iberia from the perspective of household archaeology. And from this perspective, households can be understood as collective units of residence, production, and cooperation that materially are expressed through the dwellings, activity areas, and the domestic compounds. That is what we find in the archaeological settlements when we approach them today. And from our perspective and our aim of studying the daily practices, we also understand the domestic space beyond the house itself. And we also include courtyards, open air areas, and shared facilities as areas that need to be studied in order to understand the settlement dynamics and the social logics of sedentary life. And the study of this domestic space would enable us to study the life cycle of the dwellings and the settlements, and also of the maintenance practices that allowed for the maintenance and sustain of daily life within these communities. Also, when we look at sites that also have earthen architecture as their main cultural or material trait, which is our case, as you will see now, we can delve a little bit deeper into these aspects of social organization and the maintenance of everyday life, because earthen construction offers a direct material connection to the people who built, maintained, and inhabited these domestic spaces, because earthen construction is very commonly self-built. Also, earth building involves very specific technological, ecological, and cultural choices that allow us to identify local traditions and socioeconomic organization within these communities. And also the cyclical nature that is inherent to this type of construction, including its construction itself, but also the maintenance, reuse, and abandonment, reflects the dynamic life cycle of the settlements and of the inhabitants that lived in them. So because we wanted to address daily life, we needed to switch the scale of analysis to the micro scale and to the molecular scale. And our proposal was to approach this site through microcontextual geoarchaeology. That is the study of sedimentary deposits that are in the settlement, occurring with different natures, as we will see now, but at the microscopic and molecular scale, in order to address the site formation processes that are occurring, and also in order to identify the traces of everyday life practices in indoor and outdoor spaces. So the main technique that we applied was archaeological soil micromorphology, that is the study of undisturbed intact sediment samples through petrographic microscopy, but we also applied complementary techniques that include sedimentary lipid biomarker analysis, XRD, and XRF. I will be specifically focusing on micromorphology here today because this is a summary of the data, but we also apply these other techniques. And the site that we have targeted for this study is Cerro de San Vicente, which is an early Iron Age village that is located in the Central Iberian Plateau, as you can see here, next to the Tormes River on top of a hilltop of 805 meters above sea level. Here you can see the hilltop, and even though the settlement expands all across it, we are particularly focusing on this area here in red that has been subject to open area excavation during the past decades. Here you can see how this area looks like. It is dated at around 600 BCE, particularly this house. And as you can see, earthen architecture is the main material trait that we can observe in the field. We have round houses built on mud brick with clay floors. We also have a smaller rounded facilities, and some of them are rectangular. There are believed to be storage facilities and some rectangular dwellings. And in between them, we have midden deposits, dam deposits that fill the spaces between the dwellings. We also know that these communities were linked to the trace of exchange and commerce occurring with the Mediterranean, because we have identified different Mediterranean imported objects within this context. So this is a plan view of the area, and in orange you can see the areas that we targeted for sampling. This sampling included archaeological morphology, and it was coupled with the sampling for the other proxies that I mentioned, sedimentary lipid analysis, XRD and XRF, among others. And we targeted 3 dwellings, particularly the earthen floors found inside them, also a mud brick accumulation found inside house 1, and the middle deposits that were associated with these dwellings, these 2. So now moving to the results and discussion, I will try to summarize them as best as I can. If you have any question later regarding a specific data, I will be happy to answer them. But in order for you to get the most relevant information that we got out of this study, let's start by saying that the main site formation processes that we identified at the micro scale are also 4 different types of maintenance practices that were performed recurrently by the inhabitants of the site. So we have evidence of floor replastering. This is the most common and recurrent formation process that includes the building, the crafting of floor preparation layers, and on top, clay floors. We have also evidence of sweeping and cleaning of these surfaces because we have very, very few anthropogenic components identified in association with the floors, but some of them could be found, including some ash, calcitic ash patches, and charcoal fragments. We also have evidence of dumping of the debris that is accumulated during the use of the indoor spaces. So you can see here in the medians that look like massive calcitic ash deposits. But we have also evidence of the reuse of construction materials that had been affected by fire, as we will see now. So when we look at the dwellings and the formation processes occurring inside and outside of them, we see that there is a link, a connection between the use of the dwelling and the formation of the outdoor deposits. First of all, we have, as I mentioned, the floor rebuilding and replastering as the most common upkeep practice. So this sequence of floor preparation and floor construction is repeated in this house, for instance, at least 15 times. That means that this was a recurrent practice that also always used the same construction techniques and materials. We also observe consistent fire use inside of the house, and the upkeep and routine cleaning of the surfaces that then generates waste that is later deposited outside in the medium deposits that are being formed. So this is an integrated system that links indoor fire use, waste management in the village, and communal maintenance. This is also evidence of consistent resource reuse and circular management of the resources that may be pointed towards early sustainability strategies performed by these communities. And overall, this maintenance, this recurrent maintenance of the indoor spaces indicates existence of shared skills, community cohesion, and daily social reproduction within these communities. But there is also another type of dwelling maintenance that we have detected in house 1 particularly, but that is occurring recurrently at the site. So this may be a more extended practice, and that is the intentional burning of houses in order to renew and rebuild the houses for a new construction phase and occupation phase. And in house 1, we identified the existence of an intentional conflagration that burned the entirety of the dwelling, and later the previous mud bricks that were used in the walls of the house were put on top of the conflagration layer as 3 different rows of mud bricks with in between calcitic ashes, mortar, and dismantled earth-based construction materials that were also burned at different temperatures, as we observed through micromorphology. And later, a new clay pavement was built on top of these mud brick layers. What we believe is that this was a planned renewal strategy of the dwelling that also reflected a circular reuse of the materials that were also being improved in their physical properties through the use of fire. But why were they doing this? How can we interpret all this data of the dwelling maintenance and the settlement organization? So what we have proposed is a site formation model that may have been occurring consistently in the site for centuries since the earliest occupations. We still need to test this, but at least in the area that we have studied, what we believe is that, first of all, we had the beginning of the occupation phase that involved the construction of the dwellings, and once they were ready to be used, they require maintenance, and also debris and waste was being generated that needed to be dumped outside of the dwellings. We have then a process of increase of the floor and the middle levels, likely at the same time or around at the same time. And this may have led to a point where maybe the access to the dwellings and their use was being hampered by the rise of both the floor and the middle levels outside. At this point, 2 solutions could be followed. The first one would be to abandon the dwellings and let them to subsequent decay, which we have also identified in some of the dwellings. But the other solution would be to renew the dwelling by firing it and reutilizing, recycling the building materials to build a new construction phase. So that is what we believe is occurring in terms of site formation processes and settlement organization. And to conclude, what we have observed through my PhD research is that in Cerro de San Vicente, there is a shared technological know-how in earthen construction and maintenance of the indoor spaces that was repeated through time that is indicating the existence of shared social and ecological practices. We have also observed a cyclical pattern of construction, use, and renewal that may be reflecting a potential prehistoric circular economy based on the maintenance of everyday life. And this case study opens a new path for understanding sedentary lifeways and also encourages rethinking the archaeological record through collective care and collaboration as one of the main driving forces in sedentary history. For future directions, we are aiming to analyze, of course, more dwellings and different areas of the site and other architectural elements through geoarchaeology, apply further analysis, and cross-reference with regional and ethnographic context. And the further analysis would be to apply compound-specific isotope analysis and the analysis of plant microorganisms. If you're interested in any of these specific data, these are published in these 3 papers. And that is all. Thank you again for your attention.